Okay guys, so now we're going to go through a chart example on the daily showing you a bullish and bearish trend and how we find our lower highs and our higher lows. Now, this gets very easy and you can, do it with your eyes closed once you get more experienced with it. So I'm just going to go through a quick example here now to show you exactly what I mean. So this is the first break of structure on the daily, and this is on the 29th of October 2021 if you want to just follow along. So we had a push down, we then had a pullback, and then we had another push down which broke this structure to the downside here. As soon as this candle closes and we get this break of structure to the downside, what do we know? We know that there is a lower high, which is also a strong high that caused that break of structure to the downside, right? How do we find where that lower high is, where that strong high is? Well, we get our rectangle tool and we draw it over our break of structure line, okay? Then we pull it all the way up and we find where is the highest point in this rectangle that caused the break of structure, okay? So some people may map it on here, which is incorrect, or here, which is incorrect. It is the highest point that caused that break of structure, the highest point that led to the break of structure, which is this point here, right? The very highest point within this rectangle that we've drawn on, okay? So this is the high-low, which is also, the lower high, which is also the strong high, okay? So we have this break of structure then, and then we have a pullback, because after a break of structure, we can expect a pullback. Price pushes down, it pulls back to here, and then pushes down again, and breaks structure again to the downside, okay? So we can then draw on our break of structure to the downside here, and now we know that there is a strong high that caused that break of structure to the downside, okay? Where is that strong high? Well, it is the highest point that caused that break of structure to the downside. So we can draw on our rectangle tool over our break of structure line, pull it all the way up, and then we can find the highest point that caused that break of structure to the downside, right? The highest point at which price has traded at within this rectangle. And where's that going to be? Well, it's going to be this point here, right? Because it's the highest point that caused that break of structure to the downside. So we can map this on as our strong high, okay? Then we have this new trading range. We have a break structure, and then what happens after a break structure? We expect a pullback. Price starts to pull back, and then what happens? We push down and we break structure again to the downside here, okay? So take that off for a second. Whoops. So we then have this break of structure to the downside right here. Now, how do we know where our strong high is, our lower high is? Well, we look in our leg and we see where is the highest point that caused that break structure. So we draw our rectangle, we pull our rectangle up, and we find the highest point at which price traded at within this rectangle. Where's that going to be? It's quite an easy one. It's this one right here, right? It's the highest point that caused that break of structure to the downside. Therefore, this is our strong high. Okay, then what do we have again? We have this break of structure to the downside, this pullback, and then we have another break of structure to the downside again. So we draw on our break of structure line, which is here, pretty clear one. And how do we find our new strong high? Well, we draw our rectangle tool across our break of structure line again, and we pull it up. What is the highest point in this rectangle that caused the break of structure to the downside? Well, it's going to be this point here, right? Because that is the highest point at which price traded within this rectangle, okay? So we can now move our strong high to here. And we expect these strong highs to hold, and we expect weak lows to be targeted, okay? What do we have then? We then have a break of structure. After a break of structure, we can expect a pullback. Price starts to pull back, pulls back into an area of value, and we'll get on to how to pinpoint where this area is in the later videos and in the course. And then what happens? We push down, and then we get this break of structure to the downside here, okay? So we can draw on our break of structure line, because our overall structure was push down, pull back, push down, break of structure, okay? So now what do? We know that after a break of structure, there was a strong high that caused that break of structure. How do we know how to find it? We get our rectangle tool, we draw it over our break of structure line again, we pull it all the way up, and we find the highest point within this rectangle that price traded at, that is our strong high. Okay, so this is quite a complex example which some people may get wrong because they may mark this on as the strong high because this was kind of the last impulse to the downside, right? We had a little pullback here, impulse, but that's incorrect structure mapping, okay? It is the highest point that caused the break of structure to the downside, the highest point within this rectangle. And for this rectangle, it's this point right here, okay? This is the new strong high. Then what do we have? We have a pullback again, right? We have this break of structure, we have a pullback, and then we have a push down, which breaks structure again to the downside, okay? And the process just repeats and repeats and repeats, okay? So this is the break of structure, and then we get our rectangle tool because we need to find our strong high, and we put it across our break of structure line, we pull it up. Where is the highest point within this rectangle that caused this break of structure to the downside? Well, it's obviously this point here, right? And then this strong high is then moved to here, and now we expect this strong high to hold, okay? I'll just do a couple more because we then do switch bullish soon, okay? So if I just delete that, so then what do we have? We have a push down, break of structure. What do we expect after this break of structure? We expect a pullback. Price pulls back into an area of value, right? And it doesn't breach this strong high because we expect this strong high to hold. And then what happens? We push down and we break this structure yet again, okay? So this is now our break of structure line. And what do we do now? We need to find where our strong high is that we expect to hold, okay? We draw our rectangle on over our break of structure line, we pull it up. What's the highest point that caused that break of structure to the downside? Well, it's going to be right here, okay? It's that the highest point within the rectangle that broke that structure to the downside, okay? So we can then delete our box and we can move our strong high to here, and we expect this strong high to hold, okay? We then have this break of structure, and what do we expect after a break of structure? We expect a pullback. Price pulls back, and we expect this strong high to hold, right? But instead what happens is we have a break of structure to the upside. We have a trend change, okay? Now this must happen at some point, so it's hardly surprising that we do have a trend change after all of this following the bearish trend to the downside. And then we have this break structure right here, which is a trend change, and we are now bullish, okay? How do we find our strong low? Well, what do? We get our rectangle tool, we draw it on over our break of structure line, we pull it all the way down, and we find the lowest point that caused the break structure to the upside, okay? So some people may map it on here because that's the last impulse to the upside. That's incorrect structure mapping, okay? There's only really one way that you can map structure correctly for my strategy, okay? And that is the extreme point. So the lowest point within this rectangle that causes that break of structure to the upside, which is obviously this low down here. Okay, so I hope that example kind of gave you an idea of how to map on the lower highs and higher lows, and how that the lower highs and higher lows are also the same thing as strong highs and strong lows that we expect to hold to target the weak structure.